Chapter 4, Environmental Reality.
There is nothing more terrifying than ignorance in action.
The words of the German philosopher Goethe. Having a healthy environment should be a no-brainer in bringing together the American people. When you think about it, who doesn't want clean air, clean water, healthy and non-contaminated foods, old-growth forests, open spaces, and abundant wildlife? Make no mistake, in the last century, we have witnessed a terrible degradation in the ecology of Earth. Though the poisoning of our planet is difficult to detect on a day-to-day or even on a year-to-year basis, the contamination of our planet is real and an issue that we have to turn around. Unfortunately, the question of environmental protection has become a passionate and heated debate, dividing the people of our nation and in many cases creating gridlock. Behind this contention, we can see the stealth work of the elite, who, being the masters at deception, have for decades done their job of confusing and manipulating the issues. For many years, they have created and funded two opposing points of view and thus controlled the debate. On one hand, they have funded many of the environmental organizations whose membership predominantly consists of middle and upper middle income citizens with college educations who genuinely are concerned about the environment. The problem is not the membership of the large environmental organizations, it is the leadership. A very high percentage of the leaders of the environmental organizations are political watermelons. A watermelon is a politico who talks about environmental protection, green, yet whose real agenda is political centralization and power, red. David Icke, the well-known international author who writes about the New World Order, was one of the founders of the Green Party in England. However, he left the organization within a few years when he realized that the leaders of the Green Party in Europe were primarily interested in advancing their brand of hardcore socialism. In our country, much of the funding for the large environmental organizations comes from the tax-exempt foundations, the Rockefeller Foundation, the Ford Foundation, the Carnegie Mellon Foundation, etc. These foundations are the creation of the elite so as to avoid taxation and to fund programs that concentrate power in the hands of a few. The leaders of these groups make good money and go to some fancy cocktail parties with their rich and powerful patrons. Between 1993 and 2001, these environmental groups should have made major strides in cleaning up the environment because both Clinton and Gore knew that these organizations had delivered large chunks of money and massive numbers of voters. So what was accomplished during this period of time? Not one positive thing was done for the environment in the Clinton-Gore years. They claim they protected several million acres of state lands, but in fact, they confiscated state lands and turned them over to the control of the United Nations. Unbelievable and unacceptable. It is truly sickening that so many well-educated and well-intentioned Americans are not seeing through this blatant fraud. Many of these environmental organizations were started and built by conscious and moral individuals who were doing everything they could to conserve and protect our planet. In many ways, these organizations have done a tremendous service in the past to raise the general awareness about the very real tragedy of the pollution of our land, skies, and water. However, many of these organizations have been co-opted by the elite and their operatives in the Democratic Party, just as the leadership of organized labor was bought off in the 1980s. The elite's plan is to continue to pass federal environmental regulations, the emphasis being on federal regulations, that strip away the power from local communities and the states. Pushing this a step further, they are working for international treaties such as the Kyoto Accords and the Rio de Janeiro International Treaty, which, to George W.'s credit, he has vetoed. With the spin given by the newscasts, these treaties sound to be reasonable and helpful to the environment, but in reality, these international accords are like wolves in sheep's clothing and are the vehicles to give international courts control over American sovereignty. The problems we are facing all are interrelated and come back to lack of knowledge concerning the constitutional process and the fact that most people are consumed by work, diverted by other activities, or are just lazy and want someone else to be responsible. In our Constitution, we have the 10th Amendment, which states that the federal government has these specific powers to coin money, raise an army, and regulate interstate and foreign trade. All other issues are to be the duty of the individual states, including education and the environment. Environmental protection should not primarily be a federal responsibility. It needs to be a state and local responsibility. For many, this initially is a difficult pill to swallow. However, if you really think about it, if we are going to have real ecological repair, it has to be initiated and maintained from a grassroots level. On the other side of the debate are the several neoconservative think tanks and lobbying organizations that are funded by the elite-owned megacorporations. These think tanks employ some of the brightest scientific minds in the world to argue their positions. In the past years, these organizations have contributed substantial and pertinent information in the debate over global warming and ozone depletion. For these contributions in bringing objective information to the controversy, these groups deserve credit because in the debate and the implementation of environmental safeguards, there has to be objective criteria. At the same time, it must be repeated that many of these think tanks and lobbying groups are the creation of elite-owned corporations, and their priorities are to protect their sponsors. What is as astonishing as educated Americans continuing to believe in the Democratic Party and their lies is other educated Americans who basically deny that there are any environmental problems. To this day, there is still a significant segment in the Republican Party who continue to bash any talk of environmental reform. Many of these are successful business people who over the years have been threatened with the seemingly random rulings of OSHA, the Occupational Health and Safety Administration. Their reactions and fears of federal bureaucrats is understandable. Yet these people need to open up their hearts and minds and realize that all of the Federal Reserve notes in the world are not going to protect their families from polluted air and water. Of particular interest is the John Birch Society, who over the last 50 years have been one of the most courageous and patriotic organizations in our nation. The John Birch Society has done excellent research to expose the modern-day Illuminati and their minions. Their magazine, The New American, is a well-produced publication that I highly recommend. Yet when it comes to topics concerning the environment, they seem to go out of their way to downplay the reality of ecological decline. You don't have to be a tree hugger to understand that the following subject matter has a direct effect on the quality of life of each and every person. The world population. Man as a species has been around for a very long period of time. Not until the year 1900 did the human population reach 1 billion. In 1950, the world's population had doubled to 2 billion, and today, the human population of this planet has skyrocketed to over 6 billion. This massive population increase, in relationship to the relatively short period of time, is staggering. Furthermore, a high percentage of this population increase has occurred in second and third world nations. For some who live where there are lower densities of population, this information may not seem important. This information did not really register with me until traveling in Asia and witnessing what unchecked population growth has done in China, Thailand, and India. These nations, for the most part, had incredibly beautiful, lush, and open countrysides with abundant fauna and wildlife. Today, when you